is a very strict and very clear cut definition for how they're going to be speaking. So they have to have a big opening for what they're going to say. And then there's going to be, I think you just said in here, where was it at?
I think I sent in general chat the 15-minute rebuttal, 10-minute cross-exam, and then 10-minute closing. And then I guess they get 10 questions.
Okay, cool.
For Q&A.
Yeah. All right, dope. So that works that way.
What, 10 questions and like 5 questions each, right?
It's going to be 10
That's
questions
fair.
in general, and it's whoever asks like the most, like, so whoever the questions are directed towards. I'm not going to like make sure that like both of you guys get 5 questions each, because there might not be that many people that ask one person a question if one person does really bad. You know what I mean? Like, because if somebody does really bad, they're probably going to get the majority of the questions, and that's just part of debating, gentlemen. All right. So you said Jay's going to go first, right?
Yes.
Wait,
yes.
Honorius, should we both introduce ourselves or?
Now you introduce yourself, then you go into your opening, then I'll introduce myself, then I'll go into my opening.
1 second, let me fix this thing here. Apparently my camera is reversed. Flip. All right, boom. Now it's flipped, so you guys should not be able to see it. You guys shouldn't see it in a mirrored sense anymore. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and mute up. I'm only gonna unmute if I need to. Jay, you have the. Actually, let me make sure I get my clock thing going here. All right. Can you hear me just fine? Still?
Yeah.
All right.
Should I go ahead?
1 second.
Just introduce yourself and then go into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Introduce yourself. I'm gonna start timer. We're gonna go. I'll tell you guys when you're at certain marks. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Jay, and I'm an Eastern Orthodox. And that's it. Tell me when you start the time.
Starting now.
Okay, greetings to all. Today we're going to be examining the Roman Catholic reigns of Papal Supremacy from the 300s to the 600s AD. The modern Catholic understanding of the Pope's supremacy is officially defined in the dogmatic document Pastor Eternus, promulgated at the First Vatican Council. Before diving into the historical record, I want to outline a few key statements from Pastor Eternus, so I clear on what exactly we're looking to find in the early centuries of the church. The first quote that I'll get into is from Pastor Eternus, chapter 3, section 2, where it says, "Wherefore we teach and declare that by divine ordinance the Roman Church possesses a preeminence of ordinary power over every other church, and that this jurisdictional power of the Roman Pontiff is both episcopal and immediate, both clergy and faithful, of whatever right and dignity, both singly and collectively, are bound to submit to this power by the duty of the hierarchical subordination and true obedience. And this not only in matters concerning faith and laws, but also those which regard the discipline and government of the church throughout the world." The next quote I'm going to get into is from Pastor Eternus, chapter 3, section 8, which says, we teach and declare that he is the supreme judge of the faithful, and that in all cases which fall under ecclesiastical jurisdiction, recourse nearly had to his judgments. The sentence of the Apostolic See, than which there is no higher authority, is subject to no revision by anyone, nor may anyone lawfully pass judgment upon it. These 2 points, universal jurisdiction and supreme irreversible judicial authority, form the heart of the Catholic doctrine of papal supremacy. So the objective today is straightforward: to see whether the claims laid out in Pastor Eternus were truly manifested, recognized, and embedded in the ecclesiology of the early church, specifically in the 4th to the 6th centuries. The first case we can delve into is the Donatist schism, which erupted in North Africa following disputes over the legitimacy of clergy who had lapsed during persecution, as well as over the Roman influence in episcopal appointments. The controversy centered around Cecilian of Carthage, who belonged to the Latin faction and was appointed bishop. The opposing faction, what would become the Donatists, refused to accept his ordination and appealed to the Bishop of Rome to settle the matter. the bishop judged in favor of Caesarion. However, this decision did not resolve the dispute. Instead of accepting the papal ruling as final, the Donatists appealed directly to the Emperor Constantine, hoping for a different outcome. But rather than issuing his own verdict, St. Constantine calls for a World Council at Arles to settle the issue once and for all. This event is highly significant. It represents one of the earliest clear examples where a papal judgment was not seen as final, but instead subject to review and confirmation or reversal by a broader episcopal body. Even St. Augustine, who often defended Rome's authority, seems to acknowledge this renunciation in letter 43, where he comments on the Donatist appeal and says, "They, the Donatists, chose therefore, as it is reported, to bring their dispute with Sicilianos before the foreign churches in Rome. The common outcry of all worthless litigants, though they has been defeated by the clearest light of truth, as if it might not have been said, and most justly said to them, well, let us suppose that those bishops who decided the case at Rome were not good judges. There still remained a plenary council of the universal church, in which these judges themselves might be put in on their defense, so that if they were convicted of mistake, their decisions might be reversed." In this passage, St. Augustine seems to explicitly acknowledge that papal decisions could be reversed, and that only a plenary council could render a final irrefutable judgment. This directly contradicts Pastor Eternus, which teaches that the Pope is, and I quote, "the supreme judge of the faithful," end quote, and that, and I quote, no one may lawfully pass judgment upon his rulings," end quote. Another important case to consider is the First Ecumenical Council, the Council of Nicaea in 325. The council, universally recognized for its authority, issued Canon 6, which offers valuable insight into how ecclesiastical authority was understood in the early century. Canon 6 states, "Let the ancient customs in Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis prevail, that the bishop of Alexandria has authority over these, since the like is customary for the bishop of Rome. Also, likewise in Antioch and the other provinces, let the churches retain their privileges," end quote. This understanding is reiterated and expanded in Canon 2 of the First Council of Constantinople, which states, and I quote, and let not bishops go beyond their diocese for ordinations or any other ecclesiastical administrations, unless they be invited. And the aforesaid canon concerning dioceses being observed, it is evident that the synod of every province will administer the affairs of that particular province, as was decreed at Nicaea. But the churches of God in heathen nations must be governed according to the custom which has prevailed from the times of the fathers, end quote. What these canons reveal is a clear affirmation of regional conciliar structure of authority. Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch are placed on parallel footing, each exercising jurisdiction within its own territory according to ancient custom. This model closely aligns with the Eastern Orthodox understanding of ecclesiology, where each patriarch governs his own region, without one see exercising supreme jurisdiction over the others. The final case I'll be discussing from the 4th century is the Meletian Schism, which provides another clear example of Rome's authority being disregarded even in the West. During this schism, the bishop of Rome recognized Paulinus as the rightful bishop of Antioch. However, the Eastern bishops rejected this judgment and instead sided with Honorius. This alone underlines the idea that Rome's decisions were universally binding or accepted as final by the rest of the church. In an attempt to bring unity, Pope St. Dionysius proposed a compromise. Paulinus and Honorius would both serve as bishops, and when one of them died, the other would become the sole bishop of Antioch. However, this solution ultimately failed, as Lester L. Field Jr. notes in his work on the communion between Dionysius and Honorius, communion between Rome and Honorius and Paulinus was broken shortly afterwards. What makes this case even more striking is that at the First Council of Constantinople in 381, Honorius, who, according to scholars like Szyszynski, Edward Denny, and Henry Chadwick, was not in communion with Rome. She presided over the councils for a time. This directly challenges the later papal claims that communion with Rome was a necessary condition for a council's legitimacy. When Honorius died during the council, the Eastern bishops went on to elect Thrasian of Antioch as his successor. Rome, however, declared Thrasian's election invalid and refused to recognize him. While this decision was not upheld across the church, in fact, the entire East and even many Western bishops later on recognized Thrasian as the legitimate bishop of Antioch, effectively disregarding the Pope's judgment. The schism was not resolved until 399, when a meeting was held between the emperor and Western bishops. The emperor explained that Thrasian had already been universally recognized, not just in the East, but even in some churches within the West, under Rome's jurisdiction. Seeing that the whole Christian world had accepted Thrasian, the Western bishops, including the Pope, finally conceded and recognized him as well. This entire episode directly contradicts the doctrine defined at Vatican I. If the Pope truly held immediate and universal jurisdiction, as Pastor Eternus claims, then his ruling on Thrasian should have been binding on all churches, not just in principle, but in actual practice. Yet the historical reality shows otherwise. Rome's authority was resisted, ignored, and ultimately overturned by the broader church. Now on to the 5th century. In 424, we see another important case involving an African priest named Papyrus, who had been excommunicated and defrocked by his local bishop. Instead of appealing to a council within his own region, Papyrus appealed directly to the Bishop of Rome, Pope St. Celestine. Rather than consulting the African bishops or urging a synod to be convened locally, unilaterally reinstated Papyrus and entered into communion with him. This action caused significant backlash from the African clergy. In a letter addressed to Pope St. Celestine, the African bishops rebuke his interference and assert their own ecclesial autonomy. They write, and I quote, we earnestly conjure you that for the future you do not readily admit to a hearing persons coming hence, nor choose to receive to your communion those who have been excommunicated by us. Whosoever thinks himself wronged by any judgment may appeal to the council of his province, or even to a general council, unless it be imagined that God can inspire a single individual, i.e. the Pope, with justice and refuse it to an innumerable multitude of bishops assembled in council. This statement is extremely revealing. The African bishops clearly reject the notion that the judgment of a single bishop, no matter how prominent, can override the decision of a council. They affirm that binding decisions belong to the synodal and conciliar structure of the church, not to any one individual. Their warning, and I quote, do not receive to your communion those who have been excommunicated by us, implies that Rome's communion was not universally decisive and could even be out of step with the broader church. This completely underlines the claim made by Vatican I, which states, for this reason, it has always been necessary for every church, that is to say the faithful throughout the world, to be in agreement with the Roman Church because of its more effective leadership. Clearly, it was not seen as necessary to agree with the Roman Church. The Donatist schism already illustrates this, and now this incident with Papyrus further demonstrates that even bishops in the West, such as those in North Africa, did not recognize Rome as having unilateral binding authority for them. Truth and justice were discerned in council, not imposed by a papal decree. In 430 to 431, the Nestorian controversy rocked the church after laity in Constantinople accused their patriarch Nestorius of heresy. As unrest grew, the matter eventually reached St. Cyril of Alexandria, who engaged in extensive theological correspondence with Nestorius. Once Cyril became convinced that Nestorius was indeed teaching heresy, he wished to excommunicate him. But before acting alone, he wisely sought the support of Pope St. Celestine, recognizing that unanimous action would prevent division and ensure a smoother resolution. Celestine, in response, convened a council in Rome in August 430 AD, when Nestorius was condemned and given 10 days to recant or face excommunication. Around the same time, Cyril also held a synod in Alexandria, issuing the same ultimatum. So far, this night seemed to reflect a unified front, but Cyril's own words clearly clarified the limited scope of Rome's authority. In a letter to John of Antioch, Cyril states, "The Holy Council of Rome issued a decree and indeed wrote to your piety the instructions that must be followed by those who wish to remain in communion with all the West. This remark is crucial. It tells us that Rome's decree, even one on a matter as serious as excommunication, was applicable only to the West, not the whole Church. This directly contradicts the teaching of Vatican I, which claims that the Roman Pontiff's judgments are binding on all the faithful by virtue of his universal and supreme jurisdiction. Even more telling is Celestine's own posture in his letter to John of Antioch, Jews are not of Jerusalem, Russell's of Thessalonica, and Thracian of Philippi, where he writes, "In order that the decree of ours may be executed more effectively, we have decided that this letter is to be faithfully delivered to your Lord by our son Posidonius, however you say that name, deacon of the Church of Alexandria," end quote. This reveals that Celestine himself sought reinforcement and cooperation from other bishops to implement his decree, not unilateral enforcement, but consensual execution, reinforcing a synodal model of governance. This approach reflects Apostolic Canon 34, which states, let the bishops of every nation know who is first among them, and let them regard them as their head, and do nothing of consequence without his consent. But neither let him who is first do anything without the consent of all, so there will be unanimity, and God will be glorified through the Lord in the Holy Spirit. Unquote. Rather than showcasing an absolute supremacy, this episode reflects the Orthodox model. Supremacy was in conciliarity, not a monarchical authority where Rome alone decides and enforces dogma. Celestine's actions and Cyril's commentary make it clear. Unanimity, not unilateralism, was the rule. In the mid-440s, a controversy began to stir in the monastic communities of Constantinople after Archimandrite Eutyches began teaching that Christ was consubstantial with the Virgin Mary, but not with the rest of humanity. To address this heresy, a home synod was convened in Constantinople in 448 by Patriarch St. Thracian, where Eutyches was condemned and deposed. Eutyches then appealed his case to multiple sees, with Patriarch Dioscorus ultimately championing his cause. Dioscorus requested an ecumenical council to settle the dispute, which led to the infamous Second Council of Ephesus in 449. A council so disorderly it would later be dubbed the Rubber Council. At this council, numerous bishops were unjustly deposed. The Tonus Rio was deliberately left unread, and even Patriarch Thracian was brutally assaulted, later dying from his injuries. The Roman legates, witnessing the chaos and abuse of process, fled and reported the events to Pope St. Leo. In response, Leo rejected the council entirely and declared it null and void for the Roman See. He attempted to have it annulled universally, while Emperor Theodosius II refused to heed to his appeal, resulting in a 2-year schism between the Eastern and Western churches. The schism continued until Theodosius's death in 450, after which General Narcian married his sister and assumed the imperial throne. As emperor, Narcian restored communion with St. Leo and persuaded bishops Anatolius of Constantinople and Maximus of Antioch to formally subscribe to Leo's throne, fulfilling Leo's demands and setting the stage for the Council of Chalcedon. The Council of Chalcedon restored much back to order, but there are a few key points that deserve closer attention. While the Tonus Rio had already been approved by a number of bishops prior to the council, it still had to undergo scrutiny and be compared with the letters of St. Cyril in order for its orthodoxy to be affirmed. As Father Richard Price states, Chalcedon also upheld the Tonus Rio of Rome, but despite Western claims to the contrary, it was Cyril, not Leo, who exerted the greatest influence in 451. I highlight this because Vatican I declares that the doctrinal judgments of the Roman Pontiffs are final and not subject to revision by anyone. Yet here we clearly see that the bishops of Chalcedon did not take such a view. Rather than accepting the tone on the Pope's authority alone, they felt the need to examine it against the standard of previous conciliar doctrine, especially that of St. Cyril. before concerning it as Orthodox. This demonstrates a very different ecclesiological mindset from what Vatican I presents. Another important case involves the bishops who were deposed at the Council of Ephesus II, such as Theodore Osiris, Eusebius of Dorirean, and others. Even though Pope St. Leo had already reinstated these bishops prior to the Council of Chalcedon, their cases still had to be formally examined and judged at Chalcedon itself. The Council did not simply take Leo's words as final, but insisted on reviewing each case before full restoration could occur. This is yet another example that underlines the claim by Vatican I that the judgments of the Roman Pontiff are final and not subject to review by anyone. Clearly, in practice, the bishops of Chalcedon did not see the Pope's authority in such absolute terms. Instead, what we see once again is a conciliar structure at work, where decisions, even those made by Rome, require the consensus and confirmation of the wider episcopate. The last case I'll be covering is that of Pope Zagurius during the Fifth Ecumenical Council in the 5th century. The council was convened to address the heretical documents known as the Three Chapters. Although Zagurius had originally supported the council, when summoned to Constantinople, he refused to attend and instead gave the presidency to the council to the Bishop of Rome, to the Bishop of Constantinople. During this council, the Three Chapters were condemned. However, Zagurius issued his own document called the First Constitutum, in which he defended the Three Chapters, specifically the letter of the Bas Tonari the Persian, and declared it as orthodox, and even threatened to excommunicate anyone who rejected his decision. Did the council submit to the Pope's ruling? No. In the 7th section, the council issued a decree excommunicating Zagurius by removing his name from the diptychs. That sounded pause. and temporarily deposed him. They also condemned him for trying to settle the matter without a joint examination with the bishops. What followed is even more striking. Zagurius sent a letter to the Patriarch of Constantinople apologizing and blaming Satan for his errors. He then issued his second constitution, in which he annulled his earlier decisions and formally accepted the council's rulings.
That is time.
That
is time, Jay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I literally has like one paragraph left. If that's okay.
I want to go ahead and honor the things the way that they were addressed, man. I'm sorry. Maybe we could possibly get into it in the open discussion in some way. Honorius, it's now your turn, Jay. If you would be so kind as to turn off your screen share.
I need screen share perms.
Okay, let me do that for you.
And I'll turn on my screen share and then set everything up, but then I'll introduce myself and all that.
Mm-hmm. All right, see if you can do it now.
I have perms now, yeah. I'll just turn this on. I believe I have this on my opening statement by Honorius. Hold on. Okay, so everybody, I'm going to be debating Jay on papal supremacy. All right, can you guys hear me well, actually?
Yeah, we're good.
I want to make sure. Okay. I'm going to be debating Jay on papal supremacy from the 4th to the 6th century. My name is Honorius, and on TikTok, some of you guys might know me as Unam Sanctum. That's what I usually go by on there. So this is a debate that has been in the waiting for like almost a month, and I wish the best to my opponent, and I hope all of you guys enjoy this debate. So yeah, tell me when my time starts.
Time starts now.
So we have to see what scholarship says on this issue because, again, this is a historical debate. So what I'm going to be doing is doing a valid appeal to authority. Valid appeal to authority is going to be that the authority must be qualified to speak on the subject of the issue being discussed. And their statement must be directly relevant to the subject. And I will be using scholars without Catholic leaning. So mainly I'll be using Protestant or secular scholarship. So the first scholar I'm going to be appealing to is an Anglican scholar for Oxford Dictionary. His name is J.N.D. Kelly. He admits that Pope Leo I held supreme and universal authority in the church. And he's directly addressing this, and he has the, scholarship to say such. He has the authority. And he says, as such as Peter, he assumed the functions, full authority, and privileges, and such as the Lord bestowed more power on Peter than on the other apostles. So he admits universal jurisdiction in this time. Is he a Catholic? No, he's an Anglican scholar, so he's also going to be lacking a bias. The second one I'm going to be appealing to is Henry Chadwick, who's an Anglican scholar. He says, in Leo's judgment, however, the function the Greek council, referring to Chalcedon, was to manifest its own orthodoxy by submissively indicating its assent to the ruling already given by himself, the legitimate successor of Peter, the Prince of the Apostles, the Roman See. So essentially what he is saying is that Pope Leo I was above the Council of Chalcedon, which is directly going to be consistent with papal supremacy. And he also says, God for this service to the entire church is therefore protected from leading the church astray, and in jurisdiction possessed universal responsibility inherent in being Peter's successor. So according to Chadwick, the Chalcedonians not only suggested that he was above the council, but that he also had universal jurisdiction. Was he a Catholic? No, he was actually an Anglican scholar. Now, the third one I'm going to be appealing to was actually an Eastern Orthodox scholar. He says Pope Gelasius seems to have been the first pope to assert not only had Rome never erred, so basically papal infallibility with regard to doctrinal decisions, but that the Apostolic See could not err. So according to Edward Sandzinski, Pope Gelasius, a 5th century pope, believed that the pope had infallibility. Now he is an Eastern Orthodox Christian. Now we're going to be going to, well, what does general scholarship say about this? So this is going to be from Boundless. It's sort of like a teaching or courses Lumen Learning. He says the doctrine had the most significance in the relationship between the church and temporal state, and matters such as ecclesiastical privileges, the actions of monarchs, and even succession. So this is going basically to the Unam Sanctum Papal Supremacy idea. This dates back to the 6th century. The Bishop of Rome had not just the position of religious authority, but the power to be the ultimate ruler of the kingdoms within the Christian community of Christendom. So he didn't only have papal supremacy in spiritual matters, but also in secular matters, according to the majority and consent of the scholars. Now, you might say, well, they're saying it dates back to the 6th century. But the issue is this isn't going to contradict my paradigm, because Vatican I merely affirms the doctrine itself has always been taught or has always been there, but it does not deny development of doctrine insofar as its articulation of this truth has developed. The academics are merely saying that we see this doctrine rapidly develop around the fall of the Roman Empire and generally peak in the 6th century. And again, this is from by great Catholic scholars like Dr. Ludwig Ott and Cardinal John Henry Newman. And this university is not a Catholic university. Well, it's a higher ed education, which basically gives its works to universities. It's a interfaith one, so basically as secular as you can kind of get it to. How was the church in the first millennium described by her enemies? Now, we see many Eastern Orthodox apologists make the statement that the Roman Catholic idea of papal supremacy, defined at Vatican I and taught throughout the medieval church, introduces the Pope as being an autocrat. How did people criticize the church of the first millennium view of the papacy? Did they make similar arguments or claims against the first millennium church? Well, yes, we can see that John the Grammarian made similar arguments, as he said that Pope Leo basically did acts that nobody agreed with, and only a tyrant acts this way. And he says the Bishop of Rome as an autocrat of the whole world. It is not the power of the Bishop of Rome to reunite ecumenical synods, but in the power of emperors. Who then has allowed your Leo to judge alone regarding ecclesiastical disagreements? So in the first millennium, the popes were being judged the same exact way as they are now in the Vatican I era or in the medieval era. Now, I want you guys to catch that. The main critics of the first millennium papacy generally called the Pope a tyrant or an autocrat for applying immediate and universal jurisdiction. The Eastern Orthodox do the same thing when critiquing the medieval popes with the post-Vatican I popes. Are you going to side with Pope St. Louis I and Pope Pius IX, or are you going to side with John the Grammarian, the Monophysites, and the Eastern Orthodox critics of our claims? Is it fitting of an Eastern Orthodox Christian to say the Pope is supreme? I think any Eastern Orthodox Christian, as most of this audience is, would say the idea of a Pope being called supreme is not fitting to their ecclesiology, and the fitting term would be first among equals, alone, as he is the first in honor but equal with the rest of the apostles. And he would not have some supreme authority and honor, as some Eastern Orthodox Christians might say, because this would then imply some higher form of jurisdiction. And a prominent Eastern Orthodox Christian scholar said, the Bishop of Rome is not different from the power of a bishop in each church. It is not a higher power, but indeed the same power. So my opponent, if he's asked this question, can the Pope be supreme? He says he has a little bit more power. He's contradicting the scholars of his own church. And supremacy is defined as having an ultimate authority. So a ruling king, for example, has supremacy over his kingdom. This is from vocabulary.com, which is a valid source for definitions. What does St. Augustine say? He calls the Pope, or he says the Roman Church, in which the supremacy, which in Latin is principatus, that is generally going to refer to supremacy. That's why the experts in Latin have put it as supremacy of an apostolic church has always flourished. So what is the definition of supremacy again? The ultimate authority. So the ultimate authority of the Pope has always flourished, according to St. Augustine, Epistle 43. Now, is it fitting to say that Bishop of Rome is the Pope of the whole world with distinction of the other sees? The Roman Catholic claim, usually promoted by Pope Boniface VIII, is yes, because the Bishop of Rome has universal jurisdiction. The Eastern Orthodox claim is going to be no, the Bishop of Rome only has jurisdiction over his see like the rest of the patriarchs, which we saw Jay arguing for in his opening statement. Well, what does the First Millennium Church say about this? The First Millennium Church, like St. John Chrysostom, is going to say that the Pope is the head of the choir. Paul went up to see him rather than the others. Now, if you want to say, well, this is just an act of honor, well, what does he also add? If anyone should say, why then was it James who received the see of Jerusalem? I should reply that he made Peter the teacher, not of that of his only see, but that of the whole world. Now, can the Pope change the creed? Now, the Eastern Orthodox position, which Jay is going to say, is that the Roman Pope lacks the immediate authority to change the creed. The Roman Catholic position is going to be the Pope can change the creed via immediate authority. Can we find this Roman Catholic position in the first millennium? Because this is the debate. If we can find this in the first millennium, I, by virtue of this, am going to have a sort of advantage in the debate. Well, St. Jerome, when he's commenting on a very, very big schism in the church between many figures, he's going to say this. If you think fit, enact a decree, and then I shall not hesitate to speak of three hypostases. Order a new creed to supersede the Nicene Creed. So let's go back to Pope St. Leo IX. What was he doing? He was superseding the Nicene Creed, which the Orthodox Christians will reject because they deny his immediate authority. And then whether we are Arians or Orthodox, one confession will do for us all. So he is saying the Pope, through his immediate jurisdiction, can bind the whole church to this something that is superseding the Nicene Creed. So the church, by this fact, has, or by the Pope by this fact, has the authority to supersede the Nicene Creed through his immediate jurisdiction. Now, my summary to this is going to be papal supremacy can be proven through unbiased historians, historical witnesses, early Christian figures, early church fathers. And the one thing I want to say to everybody in the audience is to be big into history, is to cease opposition to papal supremacy. And another thing I want to add is to back up your claims in a historical debate, you will need to cite valid appeals to authority, which are generally going to be historians. So that is generally going to be the criteria for this type of debate. I give up my time.
Okay, a 12-minute time sacrifice. That is going to conclude that then. Are you sure you want to do that, Honorius, before we continue?
Yes.
Alrighty. So now we're going to move into the 15-minute rebuttals. So first off, we're going to start with Jay. You're going to have 15 minutes to rebut anything that Honorius has said in his opening. And then after that, we'll move into the cross-examinations after Honorius does a rebut of Jay's introduction. So let's go ahead and get it going, Jay. Your time. Let me go ahead and grab this real quick here. Change the time figure.
Wait, I'm gonna go toilets for a second.
Yeah, go ahead. Wait a second. You've got 12 minutes. Okay. Wow, we hit 1,000 members in the server, did we? Hold on. Wow, we did. We're at 1,000 members, ladies and gentlemen. 1,000 members in the Discord server. That is amazing. Wow. Okay. So, something that I am going to be doing, this is something that I've been talking a little bit about in the Discord, is that we are going to be doing a giveaway of an icon. I haven't decided which icon yet, but I am going to be giving away an icon for free. That includes shipping, everything like that. So I'm going to be doing the submission basically just to basically be applied for it. You could probably pick the icon, Abdul. I don't have a problem with that. So yeah, thank you guys so much for 1,000 members. That's amazing. I'll go ahead and wait real quick here for Jay to get back. Goodness gracious, Jay. Are you back?
Okay, hello?
All right, how's it going? All right, so you have a 15-minute rebuttal, and that's going to be starting whenever you're ready. Just let me know when.
Yeah, so,
Uh,
yeah, you
Schoolboy,
can
I'm
start
gonna
now.
Schoolboy, I'm gonna be disappearing for about 10 minutes, so please take over in case something happens. Thank you. Starting 15
Gotcha.
minutes now.
Yeah, okay. So, the scholars that he appealed to that claimed that Pope St. Leo was above the Council of Chalcedon and that he had universal jurisdiction over the Council of Chalcedon and over the East. My response to that would just be back to that opening statement, really. If Pope St. Leo really had universal jurisdiction, then the bishops that were deposed at the Council of Ephesus II, which whom were restored by the Bishop of Rome prior to Chalcedon, they shouldn't have needed to even be judged because the Bishop of Rome has already judged them. And according to Vatican I, the Bishop of Rome judgments are irreversible and they are to be revised by no one. So you showing me a scholar claiming that Leo had this authority proves nothing because when we go read the Council of Chalcedon for ourselves, clearly tells a different story. And for the about the case of the John the Granarian, the Monophysite, the Monophysite, the non-Cusicite, actually, you're appealing to him as a means of proving that the Pope of Rome had this unilateral authority or supremacy. But John the Granarian, since he's a non-Cusicite, he's obviously mad that the Council of Chalcedon got Dioscorus deposed, and that the Orientals hold to the position that Dioscorus's deposition was invalid and it was unfair. So of course, John the Granarian is going to bring everything on Leo and his tone and call him a tyrant because of the situation of Dioscorus. So you appealing to John the Granarian proves absolutely nothing. Now on to Saint Garatius, Pope Saint Garatius. Now according to Pope Saint Garatius, you're claiming about Pope Saint Garatius. As you admitted yourself, and as you clearly showed the Eastern Orthodox scholar said that Saint Garatius was the first to claim that the Pope will not err. And according to your own admission, these claims of papal supremacy started coming after the fall of the Roman Empire in Rome. And it makes sense because when the Ostrogoths, who were Arians, took over Rome, and Rome was becoming irrelevant, we see the popes of Rome starting to make these absurd claims about their see. And even to your own admission, you said yourself that the claims of the Roman see to papal supremacy started after the fall of the empire. So after they fell and they started becoming irrelevant and Constantinople started becoming a threat, we see Pope St. Garatius making these absurd claims, and we even see St. Garatius himself in one of his letters saying that Constantinople isn't even a patriarchal see. It was still under the Metropolitan of Heraclea. So besides Pope St. Garatius making these ridiculous claims, we see him actually saying that Constantinople isn't even a see. because he knew Constantinople was becoming a threat in the 5th century because of its imperial status as the imperial capital. Now on to St. Augustine. You quoted St. Augustine to prove that he believed in some sort of supremacy between in his letter 43. That same letter 43, he literally says that the judgments of the Roman pontiff could be appealed against. So if he believed in the supremacy of the Roman pontiff, then obviously he should have known that the judgments of the Roman See can't be appealed against, because according to Vatican I, the judgments of Rome are final and irreversible. But in the same letter that you quoted from St. Augustine, he says the complete opposite. So he directly contradicts Vatican I, Pastor Eternus. And onto the addition to the creed. Can the Pope change the creed? You showed me letter 15 by St. Jerome, where Jerome affirms that the Roman bishop can supersede the creed. The issue is that when we go to the Council of Chalcedon, section 2 or section 3, if I'm not mistaken, we see that they anathematize anyone who dares to change the creed. But rather than going to the council, let's go to Pope Zagirius himself in Constantinople II in his second constitution. What does he say? He says this, and I quote, Now therefore, that these matters have been formulated by us with all precision and diligence in every respect, the Holy and Universal Synod has decreed that no one is allowed to produce or write or compose another creed, or to think or teach otherwise. But as for those who have presumed to construct another creed, or to publish, or to teach, or deliver another symbol to those wishing to be converted to the recognition of the truth from paganism or Judaism or any heresy whatsoever, the council decrees that if they are bishops or clerics, they are to be deposed. Bishops from the episcopate and clerics from the clergy, while if they are monks or laymen, they are to be anathematized. So who am I going to take? Am I going to take St. Jerome, or am I going to take the Bishop of Old Rome and his decree on the matter of changing the creed? He's clearly against the fact that people can change the creed. Not only him, but an ecumenical council. So that's St. Jerome, letter 15. Letter 15 becomes irrelevant now, because we got the backing of an ecumenical council, and we got the backing of Zagirius' dogmatic second constitution that was accepted at the second council of Constantinople. So you showing me St. Jerome proves nothing, because I'm just going to appeal to the council of Chalcedon and the council of Constantinople and Pope Zagirius. Now you mentioned St. John Chrysostom and how he believes in like this Peter Petrine Papacy or whatever. But the thing is, St. John Chrysostom was the same St. John Chrysostom that was in communion with St. Theresian of Antioch, while the Bishop of Rome declared the Bishop of Antioch, who was St. Theresian, as an invalid bishop. So if you're appealing to St. John Chrysostom to prove that he believes in some sort of papal supremacy, then that isn't going to work out, because clearly he didn't believe in papal supremacy, because he clearly was in communion with a bishop that was declared invalid by the Bishop of Rome. So you appealing to St. John Chrysostom doesn't make any sense, considering the historical facts and the historical events surrounding St. John Chrysostom and the time he lived in. So, yeah, I think that's what I have to say, to be honest. So,
Okay, so do you sacrifice the rest of your time then?
yeah, I sacrificed the rest of the time, indeed.
All right, Honorius, it is now your turn to rebut
All right.
Jay's intro. You say whenever you're ready.
All right. Hold on. Let me screen share, because I have like a pre-written rebuttal here. Well, not pre-written. I guess I added some stuff. All right.
All right,
Tell me when the time's ready.
go ahead.
Alright, so this will be my rebuttal to Jay. Now I'm going to do a quick analysis of his rebuttal. He's disregarding the primary sources of someone like John the Grammarian. He's disregarding the scholarly consensus. By the way, the scholarly consensus does not contradict me because, again, I affirm the development and articulation. And the debate is going to be on 4th to 6th century. So if Sachensky, for an example, wants to say it started in the 4th, okay, cool, but it's still going to be an authority in proving it's in the 4th century. So don't deviate from the debate and saying it's in prior centuries. It would have to exist to prove my point in this debate. Epistle 43 argument is flawed since if the Pope does something that's disciplinary, it can be questioned because Vatican I is not mentioning disciplinary documents. It's mainly mentioning something that's more so dogmatic. Pope Vigilius is referring to something that's contradicting the past creed. Pope St. Leo IX and St. Jerome are not speaking about that. They're speaking about adding to it. So that would be a straw man to my point. St. John Chrysostom contradicting the Pope in some matter, like for an example, affirming a bishop that the Pope not recognize is going to be basically denying the existence of the SSPX spirit to say that that's going to negate papal supremacy because the SSPX recognizes Archbishop Lefebvre, who I think everybody in here knows was excommunicated, but Archbishop Lefebvre is now not going to say that he denies Vatican I, and he was also not a Sedevacantist, so he affirmed Francis to be somebody with, or John Paul II to be somebody with papal supremacy, although he didn't recognize the excommunication as valid because it's a disciplinary mean, which Chrysostom could also argue. Now, people resisting against the Pope, is that a negation of papal supremacy? Now, this is going to be basically relevant to the Donatist. So Jay is basically trying to say that it's an automatic negation of papal supremacy if somebody's going to resist against the Pope. Even if I grant Jay's interpretation of Vatican I, we can still see post-Vatican I ideas of people resisting against the Pope. So this would still not be an automatic negation of papal supremacy. So for an example, the African bishops do the same thing. When the Pope does something that's disciplinary, like Francis, for an example, like telling people to do certain things that they would regard as being illicit, the African bishops declared, we, the African bishops, do not consider it appropriate for African bishops to bless homosexual unions or same-sex couples because in our context, this would cause confusion. So basically, the African bishops resisted against a post-Vatican I Pope. So that's, again, not an automatic negation. We can also see Lefebvre, who affirmed this, says that, so you can affirm papal supremacy and still hold the Pope in some personal manner, lost the faith, and he's in apostasy. As Lefebvre says, the Rome has lost the faith, Rome is in apostasy. He even says that they held a schismatic council, so you can hold the Pope to be in some sense a schismatic, also affirming papal supremacy. And you might say, well, you're just saying a bunch of nonsense to prove this. Okay, great. Benedict XVI, a post-Vatican I Pope, did not affirm the Society of St. Pius X to be in schism, as he considered them to be in a way that is leading to real unity. Francis also gave them canonical status. So again, this is not going to be an automatic negation of supremacy, because why are post-Vatican I popes giving people canonical status when they resist against some of their actions? So, and you might say, well, no pope really supports this other than these ones. No, Pope Innocent III actually recognizes that a man can judge a pope in some regard, as to, for an example, his personal character. Because I mean, even Paul Layman says a pope in fact can be notorious if it's in his personal heresy, and you can act against certain like disciplinary actions, even a local synod that's against a pope. And we can also explain this through the Lefebvite Williamson thesis, which is produced by Bishop Richard Williamson. As he says, when a pope contradicts tradition, he is acting for a counter-church, not the Catholic Church. So we can explain this away as a Donatist. We're saying that the pope, in this sense, could have been acting for a counter-church, which is not the true Catholic Church. When the pope does something that does not contradict tradition, then he is doing it for the Catholic Church. So this can be explained in ways where people might resist against the pope while also affirming papal supremacy, like the Donatists. And Leo's tome examined or judged. When we analyze the arguments on these things, we can see, well, was this judged? Well, let's see. And then I added this, anything from Pope Leo passing judgment, like excommunication. So the first thing is the majority of the people at the council, as we can see from, I think it was Ybarra's book, that they all accepted this and did not question it or examine it. They actually anathematized those who did. But a small minority did. And Pope Leo I even says that it was irrevocable to the sense of the whole brotherhood, what he, Christ, had already given down through our Rome's ministry. Foremost the sea of Christendom, judgment of the whole Christian world, may be at one with the head, which is Rome. So Pope Leo is affirming himself to have this universal authority to produce this immediate authority. And again, the minority kind of went against this idea. And is the minority going against this also against papal supremacy? No, because they're testing to see if he's contradicting the tradition of Ephesus, which is why they went to St. Cyril. This is why St. Robert Bellarmine says, a pope who is a manifest heretic automatically per se ceases to be the pope in the head. So you can check to see if the Pope is going to be consistent with prior tradition to make sure that he did not cease. This is not a negation of papal supremacy. Rather, they are being cautious, although the majority did see this as something that is a damnable act. So again, even if I grant that they judged it, this is them seeing if the Pope is consistent with prior tradition, because if he's not, then he ceases to be the Pope according to St. Robert Bellarmine. And he can also be examined or like privately examined by other theologians. As Pope Pius XII, when he was doing the definition of the dogma for the Assumption, he was literally examined by De Laurier. So are you going to say now that Pope Pius XII did not have papal supremacy? Is that going to be your claim? And then we might say, well, did people disagree with papal supremacy? I didn't find anything here that actually contradicts papal supremacy. But I just want to see if, well, maybe an influential theologian or some fallible document from a council might do so. Does this automatically negate papal supremacy? So for the analyzation, we must prove something to be valid, like a presupposition that he might hold or a supposition. So for example, we can go to a medieval church to see maybe did people contradict in the medieval church even after it was already produced in documents like, well, papal supremacy was produced in documents like Dictates Papae, Unam, Sanctum, all these things, right? Because these documents, as the Eastern Orthodox Christians will admit, gave the Pope absolute authority. So then why are influential theologians at Trent saying that the Pope does not have papal supremacy? Or why are fallible documents at Constance saying the Pope does not have papal supremacy? So the issue is what we're going to do is we're going to appeal to higher authorities like Boniface VIII, Leo IX, Gregory VII, Innocent III, etc. And we would do the same thing for the 4th to the 6th century. We can appeal to the historians such as Chadwick, admitting the Council of Chalcedon was subject to Pope St. Leo I, affirming a pope to be above a council, and an ecumenical council is far superior to a mere theologian or an incident that happened in the church. And Chadwick's thing here. Now, what he tried to argue is, well, Chadwick is just a historian, which I already analyzed. That's just dismissing sort of the scholarly consensus. And yeah, so I mean, even what's it called? She admitted that the bishops of Rome, because some people would argue Canon 26 contradicted papal supremacy, because now that I'm mentioning Chalcedon, they were not asking for anything over their see. So I just wanted to add that in there. And yeah, this would also be for Chalcedon. And he mentioned Canon 2 of the Council of Constantinople 1. When Jay presents Canon 2 of the First Council of Constantinople, this seems to be an irrefutable argument, but the issue is the Pope of the late 6th century, Papacy, did not accept this canon. Who was this Pope? Pope St. Gregory I. He was a late 6th century Pope. He argued that basically the Apostolic See only received its creed but not its canons. Wait, Pope St. Gregory I, as I said, was a late 6th century Pope because he became Pope in 590. And Pope St. Zosimus says that none would dare to contest its judgment and has preserved this ever in its canons and rules and current ecclesiastical discipline. So if Rome does not accept the canons, according to Pope St. Zosimus, you cannot question Rome. If Rome accepts the canons, then you cannot question Rome. And the canons were not accepted, so this is kind of a null argument here. Does the Meletian Schism refute papal supremacy? My opponent, Jay, is presupposing that St. Meletius did not publicly profess his loyalty to the Pope. Even if you argue he did not in his actions, I will make an analogy on how this does not go against papal supremacy. So my analogy is going to be that SSPX claims to recognize the Pope as supreme and claims to cleave to him. The SSPX resists against the Pope and wants him to retract his actions against tradition. So the same thing St. Meletius Jay is arguing, basically St. Meletius wanted. St. Meletius, you could argue, is more similar to the SSPX than he would be an Eastern Orthodox Christian, because according to St. Jerome, Meletius says that he cleaves and professes to the Pope. Although he might go against his actions like the SSPX, this is why I say him going against him the actions, but still professing loyalty and cleaving to the Pope, he's more similar to the SSPX, which would affirm Vatican I, than he would be to Eastern Orthodoxy. Now, what does the word cleave mean? Well, the Latin experts were the ones who translated this to cleave. It means to adhere firmly and closely, or loyalty and unwaveringly. So he adhered to the Pope closely. He had extreme loyalty that's unwavering, according to him, St. Jerome. So this was his profession according to St. Jerome. Now, Pope Vigilius deposed. I mean, he kind of alluded to this argument, so I might as well just address it here. The argument has multiple flaws in it. Deposing somebody due to political corruption, because that's generally what Justinian was doing, coercion. It doesn't automatically work because St. Athanasius argued that his excommunication and deposition was invalid due to it being from political corruption. The Council Fathers professed also communion with Pope Vigilius. Emperor Justinian was using political corruption and force upon the bishops, so their intention would clearly make it null. Now, again, you might ask, well, why do I bring this up? Because Jay was alluding to this. St. Athanasius, writing apparently at the end of 357, says, Liberius having exiled gave in after 2 years in fear of death, with which he was threatened and signed, i.e. the condemnation of St. Athanasius. So obviously we know that St. Athanasius was not truly deposed because there was a false intention. And the patriarchs at the council also said, because at a time of discord, I received into communion persons who had been excommunicated or not received by your beatitude, I likewise beg forgiveness. And we might say, well, where was the political corruption? Well, we can get it from Pope Vigilius himself. We trust no one is unaware that in this very church, the suite of the praetor came with a mass of armed soldiers and serried array as if for war, and try to drag us by our feet from its sacred altar. This is very similar to what happened to Boniface VIII. He also appealed to Canon 6 of the First Council of Nicaea. Jay argues that the canons go against the Bishop of Rome
5 minutes.
and are not null and authoritative. Let's see what the Bishop of Rome says. So basically, Jay's argument is, again, it goes against the Bishop of Rome in some regard because it's negating his supremacy. But what do the popes say about this? Well, when the semi-Arians are trying to use Nicaea to kind of negate the Pope's supremacy or authority in this matter, how does the Pope in the first millennium respond to this? Pope Julius says, whatever is enacted contrary to the judgment of the Bishop of Rome is null. So he's replying this to the people of Antioch, certain issues on this, because they were neglecting to invite him to their synod. So they were trying to neglect his kind of authority in this matter. And he said, well, these canons are null that you're using. So I would argue, sure, if you want to argue this, it's null according to the first millennium Pope. So you can either take one or two opinions in this matter. You're going to, one, trust in Jay's 21st century reinterpretation, a view that dismisses of Pope Julius's first-hand testimony and Sozomen's record of it. Or you're going to take my position and trust Pope Vigilius himself, an eyewitness to the church's discipline in his era, and Sozomen, a historian writing less than a century, well, it wouldn't be less than a century later. I think, yeah, I mean, it would have been around there, whose work survives as a primary source. I let the audience decide this one. So that is my time.
Okay. Next thing that we're going to be going into is the 10-minute cross-examination. The first thing that we're going to go ahead and do here is that, Jay, you're going to get to have 10 minutes to cross-examine anything that's been claimed by Honorius so far, or just anything that is regarding this topic. Please obviously stick it between the 4th and 6th centuries. And Jay, let me know when you're ready.
Just give me like 30 seconds.
Yep, that's fine. So I'm not going to be getting majorly involved unless, obviously, it gets out of hand for any reason. But Jay does have the supremacy of the conversation while continuing his cross-exam. So at the end of the day, if Jay is incapable of actually delivering his cross-examination because of any interrupting and vice versa when it's Honorius' turn, then I will have to start muting people and allowing people to continue their conversations a different way. So I'm going to keep it in a generally open method, but the cross-examination will have to turn into a mute, speak, mute, speak, mute, speak if it gets out of hand for any reason. Let me know when you're ready, Jay. Yes, for everybody who is aware, in chat I've seen it asked multiple times, this is being recorded. This will be uploaded on my channel, on my YouTube channel, pretty much immediately after this. I just got to put a little cover art thing together and then it'll be done. But yes, this is being completely recorded.
Okay. Yeah, you can start the timer now.
All right.
Okay, so
10 minutes. Let's go.
Yeah.
Ahead.
Mr. Cartesian. So you said, you said that the canons of Constantinople I were never accepted by the Bishop of Rome, right?
Well, at least according to Pope St. Gregory I, it was not accepted. He's a late 6th century Pope, so he would be on the basis of this topic.
Okay, so why is it in session 16 of the Council's Chalcedon does Eusebius of Dorirean say that the Bishop of Constantinople accepted Canon 3 of Constantinople I? Not only that, but the legates, when they're complaining over the seating arrangements of the Ephesus II, they cite the canons of Constantinople I. So if the Bishop of Rome never accepted the canons of Constantinople I, why are the Roman legates and bishops at Chalcedon claiming that he did?
Wait, so are you arguing that basically since some Chalcedon legates argue that he did, that means that Rome automatically did, even if the Bishop of Rome at a specific time, for an example, claimed he didn't?
It's not some Chalcedon legates; it's the Roman legates themselves.
Yes, I know.
Are you saying wait? Are you saying that they're gonna be ignorant of canon law, or
no? What I'm arguing is this: who's gonna be a higher authority on what accepts what, the Bishop of Rome or the legates of Rome?
I mean,
it's obviously gonna be the Bishop of Rome, and that's what I'm appealing to directly. So I think the Bishop of Rome is going to know what Rome accepts, generally speaking.
It's going to read the witnesses at Chalcedon that claim that Leo accepted Canon 3 as Constantinople 1, right?
Well, I would argue at this time, do we have anything from Leo of him accepting it?
We have the legates citing the canon, and we have Eusebius of Dorian, who was a very prominent bishop during that time, saying that Leo himself accepted it in front of his face.
Can you send the citation of that?
Yeah, the citation is session 16 of Chalcedon. I
know,
think page 91 of volume 3. And the citation of the legate saying that Rome accepted it, or the citation of the legates as well citing the canons, is volume 1, page 144.
Yeah, I know. Can you send the thing in the side chat? I mean, you could pause this time.
I can't send it. Unless you can. Unless you, can you pause the time?
Yeah, I just paused the time.
Okay, I'll send it to. Wait, I need to go on my phone to do this. To be honest.
Yeah, because I need to see that. Make a comment on it.
Let me go to. 1 second.
Well, I'm familiar with the event, but I need to see him saying that he saw it to his face.
Is it? Second. Oh yes, here it is.
Alright, send it to me so I could because you claim that he directly saw Pope Leo do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see.
Let me go to the.
Okay, so let me see this.
It's pretty explicit. He says that it was in the presence of the Constantinopolitan delegates that he accepted the canon itself.
Okay, sure. So, I mean, even if someone grants this, couldn't someone say that a later pope could abrogate such canons?
Say that again?
Even if this is granted for the sake of the argument to continue, couldn't someone say that a later pope could abrogate such canons?
I mean, no, I'm going against the quote that you showed me, saying that Rome never accepted these canons, even though the historical documents prior to the Pope saying this say otherwise.
That's not what the quote said.
Okay, what does the
quote was Pope St. Gregory himself saying that he only accepts the creed for Rome, Rome only accepts the creed at this moment, but not the canons. So what I'm going to be appealing to is generally going to be, again, a 6th century Pope, right? Who then would negate the canons of the council. So even if I grant the idea that the canons were accepted by a certain one, I'm just going to, again, rely or appeal to Pope St. Gregory I, since this is going to be in the kind of time range the popes are going to be at. So, I mean, I could argue Pope Leo I accepted it in some way, but then I could also say, well, Pope St. Gregory I rejected it, and I'm just going to take Pope St. Gregory I's view.
Okay,
so I'm just going to I'll grant it for the sake of the argument.
Yeah, I understand. So you got the Pope just contradicting each other when they feel like it. I get it.
Yeah, they're disciplinary means.
Okay,
hold on.
Okay, no. Next question.
For disciplinary means.
It's the next question. It's the next question.
All right, next question.
It's the next question. You already answered it for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
So, my other question is that do you affirm the Declaration of Pastor Eternus, which states, therefore, if anyone says that it is not by the divine constitution of Christ the Lord, that is to say, by divine law, that Blessed Peter should have perpetual successors in the Supremacy over the Church, or that the Roman Pontiff is not the successor of Blessed Peter in the Supremacy, let him be anathema. Do you accept that declaration?
Yes, I would agree with that, and I also want to add that the Pope can abrogate certain things in disciplinary means. We see this as canon law all the time. 1917 was abrogated by 1983, for an example. All right, but keep going. Yes, I agree with that.
So you accept this declaration, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you anathematize the fathers at Chalcedon in session 16, which signed onto that session, where the imperial officials concluded the session by saying, from the proceedings and from the individual guest testimonies, we resolve that above all, clemency and exceptional honor should be preserved for the God-beloved Archbishop of Senior Rome, according to the canons, but that the most sacred Archbishop of the Imperial Constantinople, Neuron, is to enjoy the same privilege as honor. So do you anathematize all the fathers?
Which canon are you specifically referring to in this issue?
I'm referring to canon 28.
Canon 28?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there was like later historical analysis where people said what the bishops asked for was not to be awarded equality with Rome's unique mission to the universal church founded in St. Peter by the Lord. I believe Dr. Susan Wessel says this, so I'm just going to take the scholarly interpretation of this since it holds more weight than both of us. So no, I wouldn't anathematize them by that.
Wait, even though it explicitly says that the most sacred Archbishop was the Imperial Neuron, is to enjoy the same privileges of honor.
I can quote her whole work for you. I'll quote what she said. She directly has a commentary on this. I think you're disregarding scholarship on this issue. Dr. Susan Wessel, for an example, she's a professor in early Christianity. She says, it is that Constantinople, New Rome, was to be given jurisdictional privileges that were modeled upon those of the senior Rome. But what kind of jurisdiction and what extent? It would appear by the details outlined in the canon, the aim was to obtain a watered patriarchal primacy in the East, that is, within the territories of the Pontic, Asian, and Thracian dioceses. What the Bishop of Rome asked for was not to be, or what the bishops asked for, was not to be awarded equality with the Bishop of Rome's unique mission to the universal church founded in St. Peter by the Lord. So are you going to, I can't ask you questions in your cross-example. Basically what you're doing is you're negating scholarship on this issue and you're imposing your own private interpretation on the canon.
I mean, it's not my own private interpretation. If we go to the Acts of Constantinople too, by Father Richard Price, he clearly notes in page 42 that when Pope Caesarius was deposed, he appealed to the See of Constantinople and was granted a retrial by Emperor Justinian. So if this privilege of ecclesiastical honors was only for the East, then how come we have the first see appealing to the second see, Constantinople, for him to be granted a retrial? How would you interpret that situation?
I mean, you have to elaborate on it more. You're kind of vague on that.
Yeah, so Pope Caesarius was deposed by Belisarius, and he appealed to the See of Constantinople to be granted a retrial. So if the ecclesiastical privileges were only for the jurisdiction in the East, then how come we have the first see appealing to the See of Constantinople to be granted a retrial if the ecclesiastical honors were only jurisdictional in the East? Why do we see the Western bishops appealing to the East?
I mean, Western, like, is the Bishop of Rome you're saying is appealing to the East?
Yes, according to page 42 of the Council of Constantinople II by Father Richard Price.
I would just say, I mean, there are certain means of like where, I mean, well, hold on. I don't see how this happened. I mean, can you show me, hold on. Can you show me like any historical like consensus other than Father Richard Price like on this issue, or like any like primary sources on this? Because again, I don't see like a direct thing of this happening in history.
Yeah. He cites the source in page 42 of Constantinople.
Yeah, can you send like an actual source?
Okay, could you pause the time? Could you pause the time?
Yep, time paused.
Yep, and you send in the source.
No, I mean, like, can you ask, like, show me, like, actual proof of him appealing to Constantinople? Because I don't believe that happened.
What do you mean, actual proof?
Like, something that, like, the three pieces of information we have on him. Like, Saint Valerius. Like, can you show me,
I'm gonna appeal to the historical to the historical sources that state that he did, right?
What do you mean by that?
All right, I'm gonna continue.
I'm gonna go to the.
I mean, are they gonna state that? Yeah, sure. Show a quote. Fine. Show a quote.
Okay. Yeah, let me show a quote.
I'll pause again.
Of the historical source, yeah. What time are we even at?
1 minute and 56 seconds left on his cross exam.
One second. Okay. Yeah, I just sent you.
All right, read off the like relevant section of it.
All
Like,
right,
like, can you read
he's
it off?
done, yeah, after he's done reading the section, we're gonna continue the time.
Okay.
'Cause you guys
Yeah,
can
so it
pause
says, Silverius had been deposed by the Byzantine general Belisarius and exiled to the distant province of Zaricia on the charge of supporting the Gothic cause. Now, at last, Vigilius was able to take possession of the Apostolic See. Silverius appealed successfully to Constantinople and was allowed to return to Rome for a third trial. So we clearly see that the head of the Universal Church, the Pope was Alderon, appealed to the second see, Constantinople, for it to be granted a retrial. That means Canon 28 not only granted ecclesiastical privileges of jurisdiction to Constantinople in the east, but granted jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction, over the entire church, which is why we see the Pope was Alderon appealed to Constantinople. So what's your thoughts on that?
So basically what he's saying is, or what you're trying to say is that Richard Price is trying to state that he was deposed, and then while he was deposed, he was trying to ask for a trial again. And also, I asked for a source from the time, like mainly a primary source of the issue. Because what I basically did with you was get an actual quote and then do historical analysis on the actual quote. So what I'm asking for you is, can you send the actual quote and then send the historical analysis to justify your interpretation? So again, I want the actual quote. You didn't send any actual quote. You just sent.
You literally use scholarly sources and made your own determinations. So you're kind of being a hypocrite, to be honest.
No, that's not what I did. What I did is I showed actual sources like Canon 28 when you quoted it, and then I sent the scholarly interpretation of this.
What? It's Father Richard Price
So
just a
what
random guy?
what I'm noticing is you can't send any primary sources. You're just sending historical analysis
Yeah, okay. So
without any primary sources on this.
Father Richard Price is a random guy. Okay, so let's move
No,
on
that's
to
not
the
what I'm
next.
saying. I'm saying you can't even send any primary source.
So let's move on to the next question.
Okay, great. Don't
So
send any primary sources. Go.
yeah. I sent you primary sources. I sent you the Acts Constantinople too. Take it or leave it. So the next question is, do you agree with Pastor Eternus when it declares the sentence of the Apostolic See, than which there is no higher authority, is subject to revision by anyone, nor may anyone lawfully pass judgment thereupon, and so they stray away from the genuine path of the truth, who maintain that it is lawful to appeal from the judgment of the Roman Pontiff to an ecumenical council, as if this were an authority superior to the Roman Pontiff. Do you agree with this?
All right, Honorius,
Yeah.
you're gonna answer, and then we're gonna move on because that's the end of that time.
Yes, I agree with this, and I guess it's my turn for cross exam.
Yeah.
Wait, can I just respond and it's done?
I'd have to agree to that.
But yeah, well, so if it's just
I
his
don't.
cross-examination, he could just kind of like come to his conclusion, and then you can do the same when it's your turn.
All right.
Okay.
So my first question is going to be, what is your epistemic criteria to determining whether the papacy is true or false?
Comparing ecclesiastical situations and reading the claims of Pastor Eternus and investigating those claims in the early centuries of the church. Since Pastor Eternus states the claim that the clemency of the Roman Pontiff has been known since the time of the apostles. So that's my criteria.
Okay, that doesn't really answer the question, but I'll go to my second question. Would you say that papal supremacy is going to be relatively false or absolutely false from the 4th to the 6th century?
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely false. I don't see it anywhere.
Okay, so so you affirm that supremacy in its very fact is absolutely false. That means you would then be condemning St. Augustine, who uses the term supremacy. And I'm going to go to the next question. Do you consider... Dude, it's my cross exam, bro. Dude, it's my cross exam.
How do I condemn St. Augustine? You're literally presupposing...
Dude,
You're
moderation.
presupposing that he...
Moderation.
He's presupposing that St. Augustine is what he means.
Stop. Not gonna do this already. We just started. Okay? Jay, it's his cross-exam. He has the ability to control the conversation, just like how I did with you. So we're gonna continue that way. Please no crash out. I'm gonna unmute you now. Honorius is gonna move on. If he doesn't want you to explain, that's Honorius's own problem with his cross-exam. We're continuing now. Go.
Well, yeah, because he used the word supremacy. So if the idea of supremacy is absolutely false, then obviously he's gonna be negating Augustine says. But anyways, my next question is: do you think the idea of resisting against the Pope, even if you're doing it through extraordinary means, do you think that's automatically negating Vatican I?
I mean, what I think would negate Vatican I is that it's the Pope makes a judgment, and
It's a yes or
nobody.
no.
Well,
No, it's a yes or no. Jason.
It's not a
Jason,
yes or no question.
yes, it is.
It's
Do
not a
you
yes or
think,
no question. I'm gonna need to answer the
dude?
question
It's
fully.
literally my cross exam. Do you think
It-
that resisting a Pope
Yeah,
is an
but you can't.
automatic negation of
Wait,
papal
hey,
supremacy?
host,
Yes
pause
or
the time.
no?
Hey, pause the time.
Dude,
Pause
it's
the
my
time. You
cross
can't.
exam. I get to
No,
pause the
pause the
time.
time.
Hold on.
He can't limit.
Hold
He
on.
can't limit me to a yes or no
All right,
question.
I'm
That's not
literally
fair.
trying to direct.
Hold
It's
on.
my cross
Hold
exam.
on. Hold on. Oh my goodness. Honorius, you need to ask questions and actually allow people to explain themselves when they answer.
No, but the issue is he's not answering how I asked him to.
Stop. You're not going to make it to where immediately, as soon as he says yes or no to something, that you immediately cut him off and then reduce him to something that he does not affirm. So you have to let him actually explain himself before you try to just provide some kind of reductio. There needs to be an explanation. Please do not ask complex questions in a simple manner. That is actually a fallacy.
Can you at
Please
least get like a
continue.
10-second timer for him, or at least like a timer?
10
Like,
second,
for my
10
time.
second timer. What do you
I don't
think
want
I
him to
am? The
waste my time.
Flash. I'm not the
Dude,
Flash to be
I just don't
answering
want him
the
to waste my,
question
because it's a
in
tactic.
10
Some people use.
seconds.
I just don't want him to waste my
I
time.
didn't do that for you, and you had several answers that were a minute plus. So continue now.
Okay,
please.
fine.
Yeah, so
Do you
could you
believe
answer
that he can?
could you ask your
I'll
question
ask it
again?
again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
ask
you
it again.
believe that someone resisting against the Pope is an automatic negation of papal supremacy? And if you answer no or yes, either way, I want you to explain how the Lefebvre-Williamson thesis would not answer this as I presented it in my rebuttal.
Yes, but my argument isn't that so resistance against the Pope disproves papal supremacy. My argument is that when the Pope issues a judgment and that judgment is protested against, and then it's reversed by the authority of the Universal Church, then that goes against Vatican I, which states that the Pope's judgment can't be revisioned by anyone, nor can it be reversed. So that's my issue against papal supremacy.
Sure. So
It's
let's
not-
say Archbishop Lefebvre, for an example, says that a pope who hosted something that the Pope believed to be ecumenical is schismatic, and he wants the Pope to completely abrogate it. Is he denying papal supremacy?
I have no idea who that guy is.
Okay, but it's relevant because you're saying that since these guys resisted against certain actions or authoritative actions of popes, then it's an automatic negation of papal supremacy. But what I'm saying is no, because certain people who affirm Vatican I have done this, because there's more nuance to understanding Vatican I and papal supremacy. Like the Lefebvre-Williamson thesis, which I asked you to answer to, which you refused to, says that the Pope, when he contradicts tradition, for an example, he does not act for the Roman Church. So then it would not be a negation of papal supremacy. Now, again, I want you to answer the question. Is it contrary to papal supremacy for Lefebvre to go against something that the Pope deems an ecumenical council? Because this is my analogy to the other resistances that happened from the 4th to the 6th century. Now, please answer the question.
Yet again, that's not my argument. My argument is that what disproves papal supremacy is when the Pope issues a judgment and his judgment is reversed by the authority of the Universal Catholic Church. That goes against Pastor Eternus.
Yes, the Pope here is reversing a judgment, and these guys are trying to reverse
that
it.
goes against Pastor Eternus, which states that the Pope's judgments can't be revisioned by anyone, nor can it be reversed.
You ignored my question because my question is
I didn't
they're
ignore
trying
your
to
question.
abrogate
I
something that
answered your
he
question.
believed to be an ecumenical council, and you're saying that, oh yeah, that's not the same thing as these guys trying to abrogate some authoritative document from a pope. So you know this is exactly the same thing, and you know you can't answer the question because you know your premise is false on this action of the Lefebvre-Williamson thesis. Anyways, I'll move on. It's my process.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
I know you
okay,
can't answer this. Do you think
I can.
that it is contrary to papal supremacy for a theologian to personally analyze an ex cathedra statement from a pope?
Say that again.
Do you believe that it is contrary to papal supremacy? I'll be more specific. For a theologian, right, to personally analyze a pope's document or ex cathedra statement to the pope himself, like on whether you should say this or not this, etc.
I mean, I'm not sure how to answer that question because that would be presupposing that ex cathedra statements were in the first millennium.
I'm saying if it's contrary to papal supremacy.
That's
answer the
something that you
question.
would have to prove.
No, I'm not saying did this happen in 4th, 6th century. I'm saying is this contrary to papal supremacy itself?
Yeah, well, you're mentioning the second millennium case, which
yes, that's literally what we're debating. We're debating the second millennium idea, according to you, isn't the 4th and 6th century. So answer the question. So because you tried to argue, well, Leo was examined. No, hold on. You tried to argue, well, Leo was examined on this, so it's contrary to papal supremacy. So great. Answer the question then. Is examination automatically is it automatically contrary to the idea of papal supremacy? Examining, like, let's say, an ex cathedra statement. Answer the question. Stop avoiding it.
So that wasn't my argument. My argument was that what disproves the authority of Rome is that the Bishop of Rome's judgment on a doctrinal matter had to be scrutinized at a council and needed to be judged by bishops to see if it's in line with a prior teaching. So if the Pope was in fact making an ex cathedra statement, then there will be no need to see if that teaching contradicts a prior teaching of the
Okay,
church.
great. So let me ask you this. Why did
Yes.
Pope Pius XII have his personal theologians examine his dogmatic teaching on the Assumption, which was ex cathedra?
How did they examine this?
They directly checked orthodoxy and other statements of it. De Laurier was specifically one of the personal theologians on this matter, and I showed the text on my rebuttal. So how come this happened if this is automatically contrary to papal supremacy?
Well, I have no idea, to be honest. I don't know.
Oh, okay, you don't know. Okay, great.
I don't know.
I think my other question to you is, do you think that, let's say, a fallible statement in a ecumenical council contradicts, like, if a fallible statement in an ecumenical council contradicts papal supremacy, does that mean it's automatically false? Yes or no? Or not yes or no. You can answer however you want.
Say that again?
If a fallible statement in an ecumenical council contradicts papal supremacy, does this automatically negate the truth of papal supremacy?
If a fallible statement contradicts papal supremacy.
Fallible statement in an ecumenical council. Like a fallible document that's inside of an ecumenical council. Does it automatically negate papal supremacy from being taught in that church at that specific time?
And it depends what the document is saying, to be honest.
Let's say it says the council has authority over the Pope.
I mean, if it says that the council has authority over the Pope, then yeah, I would say that's contrary to papal supremacy because.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
do you believe that? Do you believe? Hey, bro, I let you answer the question. So you believe?
I wasn't done.
Oh my days, dude! It's my
wasn't done. I wasn't done.
I paused the time. He
didn't let me. He didn't let me finish.
I let him answer.
Hold on.
He didn't let me. He didn't let me.
I let him answer. But okay, you know what? You can keep going, Jay.
Honorius, just move on. If you don't want him to explain, then just move on.
Sure, I'll move on. I'll just read this off because he said yes. And if we read the Council of Constance, which was in the 14th century, by a time Eastern Orthodox Christians will admit that Dictatus Papae, Unam Sanctum, other documents taught papal supremacy, they say this, and that everyone of whatever state or dignity, even papal, is bound to obey in those matters, referring to the council. So you admit papal supremacy existed in the 14th century, even though there was some sort of negation of it in a fallible document in an ecumenical council, even after papal supremacy was determined. So Jay, it's not an automatic negation, as it was taught as a negation of it wasn't.
Yeah, again, you're.
Hey, bro, I'm literally speaking. Like, why is this guy? I didn't even ask a question. I didn't even ask a question. Thank you. So I basically, you agree, in the 14th century, papal supremacy was taught. In the 14th century, fallible documents contradicted it inside of an ecumenical council. Thank you. Okay, great. My next thing I'll ask is, how do you believe that Saint Meletius, as St. Jerome says, cleave to the Pope?
He professed to have communion with the Pope as the Bishop of Antioch, but the issue was that the Pope didn't recognize him as the Bishop of Antioch. He recognized He recognized Paulinus of Antioch as the rightful bishop, not St. Meletius.
But do you at least agree that he cleaved to the Pope, as St. Jerome says?
Yeah, so cleaving to the Pope just means that you possess to hold communion with the Pope, but the issue is that the Roman Church didn't hold communion with him. They hold communion with Paulinus of Antioch, who I already said possessed to be the Bishop of Antioch because Rome accepted his uncanonical ordination.
Okay, great. So I think the issue from this is going to be you don't understand what the word cleave means. Cleave means to adhere firmly and closely or loyally, unwaveringly. So basically, St. Meletius had his absolute loyalty to the Roman pontiff. Now I'll move on. Do you believe that if someone is forced to do something by political coercion, that their deposition is invalid? Yes or no? Or not yes or no, however you want.
Say that again?
Do you believe that if someone, let's say, does a certain act of deposition, let's say a patriarch on somebody, if that is done through a political act of coercion, is that null or not?
Jay can answer this, and then time's up.
If it's accepted by the council, then I wouldn't think it's null. And if it's accepted by the Pope himself, because he ratified the acts of the council.
That's not relevant to my question. I just asked,
no,
do you think it is or not? I mean, this guy's just rambling on.
I'm not rambling.
Okay, I think we should just give up my cross exam.
Hold on.
This guy answered the question. He's just
I'm
rambling now.
answering the question.
Like, I'm not talking about the billion.
Oh my goodness.
And we're moving on after this.
Yeah, so it depends. If the Pope himself ratifies the acts of what happened to him, then yes, I would declare it valid.
Okay.
Because
great.
it was declared valid by the Ecumenical Council.
So now we're gonna go ahead and move into the closings. Do you guys need 10 minutes for this or no?
No, I don't need 10 minutes at all.
All right, we're gonna do 5-minute closings. Okay, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna move into Q&A. The way that the Q&A is gonna work for everybody who's currently in here is that you guys are going to be able to start getting in line for the request feature to come up and speak. You guys will ask a question and then you will drop. You will not debate the panel. Okay? You will ask your question. These people will answer and then we'll move on. We're going to try to
Wait, is it okay? Is it okay if we choose who we want to ask the question?
No. I'm going to be bringing people up according to first in line in general. So whenever people start requesting to speak, we're going to get the line from that. And then, of course, yes, if for some reason it's only Orthodox people coming up here, then yes, I'm going to start changing it around so that Catholic people come up as well and vice versa. So I'm going to make sure that it is equal as humanly possible. I'm not going to just make one person answer questions for the entire Q&A. But anyway, Jay, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, so from this debate today, we saw that questions couldn't be answered, especially questions resolving the actual ecclesiastical situations during that time. It couldn't be answered. It went unanswered. Rather than answering it, he just appealed to authority. And when I challenged that authority, he just told me, oh, I don't have the authority to actually challenge the authority he appealed to, which I think is absolute nonsense. So I think from what we've learned from this debate is that papal supremacy, as defined by Pastorus Eternus, is totally contrary to the actual ecclesiology of the early church. And we see that consensus-based ecclesiology, which the Eastern Orthodox possesses today, was the ecclesiology of the early church. It wasn't some autocratic papal supremacy monarch ecclesiology, which the Vatican I dictates was the ecclesiology of the first millennium. So, yeah, I would just like to say thank you to Mr. Cartesian for participating in this debate. And I want to thank Rash J for hosting this debate as well. And I want to thank everyone who showed up in support of either me or Cartesian. I hope you guys enjoyed the debate. And I hope that God may bless all of you. And I hope today you guys learned how the actual ecclesiology of the early church was structured. So with that being said, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, thank you very much for letting me participate in this debate today. That's what I have to say.
All right, Honorius, you have your 5 minutes. Go ahead.
So the first thing I want to kind of point out is that during this debate, I think everybody saw who used scholarly consensus along with primary sources, as I provided the primary sources along with the scholarly interpretation. Now, I do understand this is a majority Orthodox server, so I do understand that most of you guys are probably, rooting for Jay and the Catholic people rooting for me. This was a good debate. I think everyone liked to watch it. Of course, we're all probably going to root for our own guy, but, I think we should be charitable to each other and charitable to me and Jason. Because this takes a lot of time, to study, kind of debate out here. And there's one quote I kind of want to read from St. Augustine, because at the end of the day, this is a religious debate. So I think both us Orthodox and Catholic Christians should recognize one thing about God, and it's a quote from St. Augustine, where he says, God is more brother than any brother, more friend than any friend, more lover than any lover. So I tell you not to just, think about this debate just as a way to like win or lose on Discord, but to seriously kind of think about this as something that is a spiritual matter, something that is worthy of salvation, something that is extremely important to the spiritual life and theological life. I just want you guys to all seriously think about that and just think this is more beyond than Discord. This is the afterlife. This is God. This is what Jesus Christ willed and what he wanted. And I just want all of you guys to meditate on this after the debate. God bless everyone.
Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the Q&A. Mods, if you'd be so kind as to turn on the request to speak feature so that people can get in line.
I already did it.
All right. Amazing. Amazing. So, can you guys? I'm actually going to take the advice from the chat here because the chat was saying that maybe it's a better idea to let people choose. So, we're going to start with Jay. Jay is going to authorize somebody to come up here and request to speak specifically. Okay, and then basically after that's over, then Honorius, you're going to be able to accept somebody who's in the request. And then it'll keep continuing that way. Anybody who is in this audience is welcome to put themselves in the request to speak feature. That is what they must do in order to get accepted up here. So put yourself in line, and then when it is time, then you can be selected. I currently only see 3 people that are requesting to speak right now. At this moment.
Yeah, what one of the persons I wanted to choose was Sig, but since Abdul Nasir is already up here, if he wants to ask a question, then he can go ahead and ask a
I
question.
thought we were asking people who are debating against us.
No, I'm not asking a question. I'm not in a good position to ask a question.
Okay, yeah. Could you let out Sig? Let out Sig.
No, so Honorius, what that means, and this is pretty common sometimes in the formal debate scene, where the person whose turn it is chooses the person that comes up here, and then if that basically somebody to question the other. That's the entire point. It's gonna make it easier. It's gonna make it easier to make it to where everybody gets equal value to it. And then if nobody has anybody specifically requesting, then I might do some chats where people can just ask questions in chats, as well as TikTok, because we have about 60 people in TikTok watching this that are not in the Discord that we could also refer to as well if the Discord stuff is not going well. But with that being said, Sig, you are being requested to come up here and ask a question. You may ask your question, and then you must drop after. Thank you.
Ooh, I feel so important now because everyone's watching me. Shameless plug, guys, go subscribe to me. Anyway, second. My question that I'd like to ask would be to Honorius. Honorius, fantastic debate. Well done with what you were trying to do. Jay, of course, well done to you too. I'd like to ask you, Honorius, given the fact that we are talking about the 4th, 5th, and 6th century, in the 4th century, a claim is made by Father Richard Price that Rome simply did not have immediate jurisdiction or authority over the patriarchates in the East. How would you, as a Roman Catholic who believes that such jurisdiction is immediate, can clearly be seen in such a time that scholarship likes to believe that it is not the case? Thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a very blessed day.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I hope you have a blessed day too. And how I would respond to that is mainly I'd have to see the justification which Father Richard Price is giving. Because again, as I do recognize the authority of scholarship as a valid appeal to authority, I also recognize their commentaries on primary sources. That was my main goal for the debate. So I'd have to see the primary source which he uses, and then see his scholarly analysis on the certain issue. So I would have to see his primary source to mainly give my opinion on that.
Okay. So now,
wait, is it okay if we actually? Is it okay if both of us respond to the question asked by the individual?
No, that's weird. Nah. I don't agree to that.
We'll just have it set to the person who is targeted. Will ask will answer the question to defend themselves, and then it'll continue that way. We're not going to have like a rebut from the opposition to make it seem like that person is incapable of answering, because that's how psychologically it would appear. So, Honorius, you now have the choice. You have 3 Roman Catholics requesting to speak right now. Who you?
I heard Wayne. He DM'd me that he wanted to go up, so maybe I'll let Wayne get up.
If Wayne requests, you can definitely let him up. I see Wayne.
Wayne, you got to request it.
I just invited him.
Okay.
All right. How's it going, Wayne? You may ask a question, and then you must immediately drop. You there, Wayne?
Hello?
Is Wayne using the bathroom?
I don't know. Maybe that's even.
That's a reference to the Sig Agan debate, by the way. W.
Wayne, before the rapture, bro.
Prior to that,
yeah. Wayne, mute your mic and unmute, bro. It's glitched.
All right.
Maybe like put him back down and put him back up.
All right. Yeah, we'll do it that way. Okay. Yeah. Request to speak again. I'll bring you back up.
Wayne, you there? Hello?
Yeah. What's up, bruv?
Okay.
That's freaking Gabriel. Wayne is currently still not coming up. Do you want to wait for him, or do you want to?
No, I'll just get another guy. I'll get him next time. All right. Who else is requesting?
He's back. He's back.
Oh, he's back.
Okay. Yeah, let's try it again. If it doesn't work this time.
Wait, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
you.
Yeah,
we can.
Yeah. So ask your question and then just move down. Thank you.
Okay. So my question to Jay is that you made a claim about Pope Saint Silverius upon the premise of Father Richard Price, right? About ostensibly how Pope Saint Silverius, after he was exiled the first time, appealed to Constantinople and Justinian ostensibly to have his case relooked at. My question to you is, the text he quotes is the Liber Pontificalis, which has a contradictory statement to Liberatus of Carthrage's Breviarium, which the Liber Pontificalis doesn't mention him appealing at all, which is what Father Richard Price appeals to. It only says that he died once, according to the part of Saint Silverius, but there's a conflicting account with another account in Liberatus of Carthrage's Breviarium, Victor of Tenuna's Chronicles as well. So my question to you is, why would you accept a text that, one, accuses your own saint, Theodora, of being a underhanded Monophysite who killed your own pope? Two, where is the claim that he ever appealed to Constantinople? And three, that your own, pope basically killed another saint?
Okay.
Yeah, so my answer.
Sorry, 1 second. Just to do this real quick, I just got banned on TikTok apparently, so I'm getting the appeal going now. Not really sure how that happened.
Did you just get banned right now?
Yeah, like just now.
Okay, guys, anyone else that's coming up here, please do not use, because it is on TikTok. Well, now it doesn't matter, but
I mean, nobody
like the
anything.
killing, like kill. Don't use that word. Just say unalive
I mean,
in the
I
future.
don't even think anybody did
You
that,
just
but...
used it.
No, he's banned on TikTok,
I'm already
dude.
banned, bro. Don't worry. All right, Jay, go ahead. We're just gonna keep continuing. I mean, we still got 118 people in here, bro. We're chilling, and I'm still recording. So keep going.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
so
if you go-
so my answer to that would just be to appeal to an eyewitness account of the historian during the time of Saint Justinian, named Procoppius, and he wrote his history book called Procoppius' Secret History, and he's an eyewitness account, and he seems to corroborate the story. So I have no reason to reject the story, which Father Richard Price appeals to. So there's that.
Alrighty, Jay, you now have the ability to bring somebody up here. If they're not in the request, you're more than welcome to request somebody who is in here to come up, or you can request. It seems like the only Eastern Orthodox up here that's available right now would be Perk, and then we also still have Sig as well requesting again. But the choice is yours, obviously.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't even know anyone in here. If I'm being honest.
Well, I mean, that's fine, but like you just like what you could do is that, I mean, if you'd rather just bring anybody up, that's completely up to you. But it is your turn. You have to choose somebody to bring up.
Let me check. I don't see anybody requesting.
We have 4 Roman Catholics and Sig left.
Yeah, just go for Sig again,
All right.
since he's the only one that I know that's requesting.
Hello again. I don't know if I'm also able to ask Jason questions as well, if that's okay.
I don't care.
All right, cool.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Jason, a question for you. Fantastic debate, like I said again. You've cited Pastor Aeternus a lot. And when you cited Pastor Aeternus, you specifically made the claim that when the bishops of Carthage looked at the Roman appeal, that they rejected it on the grounds that they don't believe that such a person could be an autocrat. Given the documents that you've cited, how would you actually justify that claim, given the fact that the Roman Catholic Church in recent history, given Vatican I, have allowed synodality to be a major part of their ecclesial processes?
So how I would answer that question is that the Pastor Aeternus makes a claim that the Pope has immediate jurisdiction, immediate and universal jurisdiction, and if he was to act on a matter of the say reinstating a priest, that issue or that matter is to be obeyed by everyone. So if such an act of supreme and immediate jurisdiction is to be obeyed by everyone, then I think yeah, I think it's the case that we shouldn't be seeing people on their own jurisdiction opposing the Pope's decision to actually what's it called? To actually we shouldn't see African bishops on their own jurisdiction opposing the Pope's decision to reinstate somebody.
Alrighty.
So
Yep. Thank you.
yeah, that's not.
Honorius, you're
All right,
Oh.
I'll let up. Who's Papist Talon? I guess he's requesting up.
Rabbi Talon.
Yo, hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My question to Jay is about Canon 28. You have letter 98 of the council, the letter to the Pope that says that he has privileges from Christ because the excommunication of Dioscorus. It says that he has privileges from Christ specifically. And then you have in Canon 28, it says that the privileges was granted by the church. Now, which one is it? Because the council is claiming that, one, the privileges of Rome were granted by Christ. Two, the privileges of Rome were granted by the church. So is this council contradicting Canon 28 and then letter 98? That's my question. You can.
Alrighty. Go ahead, Jay.
But he mentioned letter 98, but by who? I mean, if he's referring to Leo, then I'm just gonna say I'm gonna take the signatures of the fathers at the council, who were 200, and they all agreed that the ecclesiastical privileges were granted to Rome by the canons. So, if the divine institution was truly a Catholic idea, because we profess in the creed that we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, if this notion of the privileges being granted by Christ was a universal Catholic idea, then we shouldn't be seeing any confusion in councils as to how Rome got its privileges or its supremacy. So I'm gonna take the opinions of the fathers at the council Chalcedon.
Okay.
So yeah.
Alrighty. Jay, you have the option to either bring somebody up who's requesting, which we currently have 3 Roman Catholics and then Rumi, labeled as a Kantian, or you can specifically choose instead to give it over to Honorius, and then I will ask him a question that's in chat.
Yeah, I'll just give it to Honorius. I don't see anyone
Alrighty.
in the
so
chat.
All right.
What I'm gonna
I see
hold on,
some.
Honorius. So now what we're gonna do is, or actually no, sorry. So we do have Sig one more time. He had one more question for Honorius, and then we'll probably start moving.
Oh wait. Sorry. There's actually somebody that wants to come up.
Who is it?
His name. Wait.
ERM.
Wait. Actually, no. Don't let him come up. I know exactly who that guy is.
Alrighty.
Yeah. Don't let him come up.
All right. Does any Orthodox Christians in the chat have a question specifically for Honorius here, before I let him actually request somebody again? That's just how I'm gonna keep it fair.
Honorius, bring up Rumi.
All right. I mean, Rumi was gonna be my next choice, but yeah.
I'll let him come up here if. Alrighty. Ignatius asks, "What did you eat for dinner today, Honorius?"
I haven't had dinner yet.
All right. How would you feel if you didn't eat breakfast this morning?
I probably would be very hungry, but good thing I ate breakfast.
Oh, based. All right. You want to bring up Rumi now for your turn?
Yeah, I'll bring up Rumi.
How's it going, Rumi?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, man. Go ahead.
Hello everyone. Kind of loads of people here. Okay, so my question is to Jay that so we're looking at all the evidence from the centuries that we have chosen to do with this. And when we look at the evidence, we're assuming our 5 senses. So how do we know our 5 senses are reliable when we read these documents?
Okay. Go ahead, Jay.
Hello.
Did you listen? Did you hear him?
Can you re-ask the question?
Yeah. So his question was premised on that we look at all the evidence that exists in the 4th to 6th century, and we use our five senses to basically judge this evidence. How do you know that your five senses are reliable in order to justify your position?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough. Alrighty.
I don't know.
Jay, do you want to bring somebody up, or do you want me to ask a question that I have here for from Hayden, who's an Orthodox, for Honorius?
Yeah, just pass it on to Hayden.
Alrighty. So Hayden
All
asks
right.
you, Honorius. He says, "What do you think about Augustine not considering Rome as the final court of appeal?" He says in NPNF Series 1, Volume 1, Letter 43.14.16.19. He says, "Well, let us suppose that those bishops who decided the case at Rome were not good judges. There still remained a plenary council of the universal church, in which these judges themselves might be put on their defense, so that, if they were convicted of mistake, their decisions might be reversed."
So yeah, there's one of two responses. So if St. Augustine here, speaking of rather disciplinary dogmatic means, if he's speaking about disciplinary means, we actually do admit that it can be reversed because Vatican I is referring to dogmatic means. So like for an example, we can see Paul IV's document was abrogated by the consensus of the theologians, according to, I believe it was a theologian of the 19th century who was commenting on the party of Janus. And this was post-Vatican I theologian. And we can see also disciplinary actions can be, for example, judged by other people if there's a higher weight, which I also responded to on other means. But if he's referring to dogmatic means, then I would have to say he would be using more primitive terminology, but he could be alluding to the Lefevite-Williamson thesis, which I already presented in this debate.
Okay. Honorius, would you like to bring somebody up?
There was a guy who DM'd me that he wanted to get up. Let me see him.
What's
His name. His name is Introvelli 23.
I think
He said up me up, so maybe him.
All right, cool.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Indeed.
My question is to Jay is that if you said whatever the Pope ratifies is what's true, then what did you say the Pope Vigilius was deposed in session 7 according to Richard Price, the deposition itself wasn't ratified?
What? Okay, so yeah, what I would say to his question is that Pope Vigilius ratified the acts of the council, and from the acts we have, that's what I'm judging by. And according to the acts we have, in session 7, Vigilius was excommunicated and his name was removed from the sacred diplets, and he no longer had his ecclesiastical title in the synodal decree issued at session 7. So that goes to show that he was deposed, and that the synod agreed with his deposition, which is why it's still in the acts today in the 7th session, and we don't have any other acts that says otherwise. So
okay.
Yeah,
let me grab the thing I was gonna do here. This was asked. Where was it at? Okay, so I have another one from an Orthodox. This is for Honorius and Jay, so I'll give you guys both an opportunity to answer without interruption. We'll have Honorius answer first, since it's his turn technically to receive something. It says, "Did the Church ever have in mind that the Roman pontiff could act independent from a synod?"
Yes, I provided that with St. Jerome.
Jay?
The issue with him saying that he presided that with St. Jerome is that two preceding ecumenical councils clearly make what St. Jerome said null and void, because they clearly said that no one can change the creed, whereas St. Jerome said that he can change the creed. So I'm going to take the two preceding ecumenical councils over what one father had to say. So there's that.
Honorius, would you like to bring up? There's 3 people requesting that.
Yeah, there's Wayne some people are asking me to bring up Wayne again, so I guess I'll bring up Wayne.
All right.
People are messaging me a lot saying bring up Wayne. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right,
so
Wayne, what's up?
my question was for Bryce J. So Bryce J, would you say that your father was a drinker and a fiend?
Okay, dude, take this guy down. I'll end up with another guy.
In a sense.
That was stupid. I'll bring up Erm seems like he's serious. That was stupid. All right, Erm.
That's funny.
I'm actually really stupid. All right, Erm.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
My question is, yeah, it is. My question is for Jay. How would you account for the papal advisors proofreading ex cathedra statements, like for praxis? Like, how do you think that goes along with Vatican I? That's my question.
Could you bring it up again?
Yeah,
To
yeah.
re-ask the
Come back.
question.
Yeah,
I
come
didn't.
back. Come back up, ERM.
I didn't
Sorry.
quite understand the question, to be honest.
All right. Just
Hello?
re-ask. Yeah, re-ask it again. And then
How would
I
you
won't kick you down until he understands.
how would you account for the papal advisors proofreading ex cathedra statements and other encyclicals and other statements by the popes for praxis, and that going along with Vatican I? This is for both Jay and Honorius.
I mean, yeah, I would just say, even if it were the case that the papal advisors disagreed with what the Roman Pontiff is saying, I can't see a coherent reality where the ex cathedra statement is going to be revoked, because you believe that the ex cathedra statement is that has the direct intervention of the Holy Spirit. So whether they judge it to be wrong or not, it can't be wrong because it's infallible and it's directly guided by the Holy Spirit. So I don't know.
Honorius.
I would say,
that's-
is he talking about like a personal theologian? Like, wait, what did he? What can you like stillman his thing again? I thought it was only for Jay. I wasn't really like listening. What did he say?
Yeah, could you bring it up again?
Yeah, I'll bring it
So
up
we can
again.
ask like.
We'll try it. We'll try it one more time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let him come
So
up again.
what were you saying basically, I didn't hear you like the first time.
I said, how do you account for the papal advisors proofreading ex cathedra statements and other statements such as encyclicals of other natures being proofread by papal advisors for praxis? And in accordance with
I'm totally fine with that. De Laurier did that to Pope Pius XII's ex cathedra statement for the Assumption of Mary. I actually did bring that up in my cross exam. So that actually is my point against kind of their argument with like the minority wanting to examine Leo's tome is basically kind of that exact action. So yeah, I'd be fine with that. And then I guess I bring up a person.
You just
I think
brought
he's
up,
done
you
more
brought
than
up
5
ERM.
people already.
Yeah, you brought up ERM. So, Jay.
Yeah. I thought that was like. Never mind. Oh yeah, I did.
All right, Jay.
Yeah, okay. Can I bring up?
An Orthodox named Leop, who's requesting? I don't know. Oh, now he's not.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Let us see since he's requesting again.
All right.
Hey, this is going to be my question for Honorius. Honorius, in your previous question, you answered the fact that people are allowed to look over papal documents, presumably before they go out into the public and before they are seen by other people within the clergy. I understand that people from the dicastery can do that. My question to you is, given the fact that Pastor Eternus is very clear about the fact that its ordinary power is immediate, not just concerning faith and morals, but also in those regards with the discipline and government of the church throughout the entire world. This is Pastor Eternus, section 2. In section 8, in chapter 3, it also says that such authority is not subject to revision, not just reversal, but revision by anyone, nor may anyone lawfully pass judgment upon it. How then, given Pastor Eternus, are people who receive documents that have already been edited by, let's say, the Pope's personal checkers with the tome, how are they able to check over documents when they're not supposed to be allowed to revise documents that have publicly gone out in the 5th century?
Are you referring to what's it called with Chalcedon?
So with the tome specifically, this has not already been checked by the Pope. Once it's gone out, this has gone out under the assumption that the Pope's personal writers and handlers have already checked through the document. This has already been received at the council, so they can't recheck it again. But at Chalcedon, all the other Eastern bishops check over the document. But in Pastor Eternus, in chapter 3, section 8, it says that it is not subject to revision by anyone. And this is specifically for ecclesiastical discipline and government, as it says in chapter 3, section 2.
I believe regarding to like the canon being like, or not canon, the tome being judged, I have to think critically. I'm pretty sure Ybarra in his book, doesn't he state, well, he does state that majority of the bishops actually didn't really want to examine it, and it was a severe minority of two extreme groups. And then I could justify that by saying that they were just like testing if he was tradition. I said, well, he can't be judged. But the issue is, if the Pope is contrary to tradition, then at least according to the more first century or first millennium view, as Bellarmine says, he would automatically cease to be the Pope. So they were kind of checking for these extraordinary means. Although the majority of the bishops did declare these this minority anathema. So there's many other ways you can kind of answer this. But yeah, I would mainly just respond with either one, they were just checking his orthodoxy to see if he ceased to be the Pope or not. And I would allude this through Bellarmine's doctrine and historical explanation. Or two, I would just say these were an extreme minority and they were declared anathema by the majority, therefore they lack relevance. So there would be those two responses.
Okay. All right. You have two people that you can bring up, Honorius. You have Elijah. And
I guess a guy
Talon.
called Elijah, and there's a guy who keeps DMing me, but he's Orthodox. So I don't know if he would ask Jay a question.
Well, so
but I guess I'll do
have
Elijah.
I have something that I'll ask you that supports Jay's position after this from Abdul Masih. It's actually something that's from Pedro that I will.
Okay.
After
But
this.
Elijah can ask his question.
Go ahead, Elijah.
Yeah. So thank you guys for the debate. It was pretty good. Good job from both sides. So my question is directed at Jay. He mentioned that in the Melentian Schism, the Pope didn't recognize Melentius as bishop, but he said that means they're not in communion. My question would be, is the Pope not recognizing Melentius as bishop the same as him not being in communion?
According to historical sources, in 379, the Pope sent a synodal letter. The Pope sent a synodal letter to the Synod at Antioch in 379 to re-establish communion with Saint Laurentius, according to Henry Chadwick. So, yeah, that's that goes to show that if you're not recognized as the bishop of Antioch and you're training to be the bishop of Antioch, then that obviously means you're not in communion with the false claimant. It wouldn't make any sense for Rome to still be in communion with someone who's falsely claiming to be bishop of that city. So yeah, I would say that proves that they weren't in communion, as Henry Chadwick says in his book, The Church and Ancient Society. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Jay.
Jay,
would you like to try to bring somebody up, or would you like me to read Pedro's question for Honorius?
Yeah, read Pedro's question.
All right, Honorius, let me know if you want me to read this as many times, because it's a little bit of a long, it's a little bit of a wind-up.
Are you able to steelman it?
I mean, I'm gonna ask it directly, and then it has a little bit of explanation as well.
Okay.
So it says, in 535 AD, Emperor Justinian issued Novelle 11? Yeah, 11. Establishing by force of law an autocephalous church entitled Justiniana Prima in Dacia, the province of his birth. Dacia was part of the Roman Patriarchate, subject to the Pope, and overseen by the Papal Vicariate in Thessalonica. In Novelle the 11th, Justinian removed Dacia from the papal vicar's jurisdiction and redrew the lines of papal jurisdiction, establishing the new archdiocese of Justiniana Prima as the autocephalous. Centuries later, the lines of jurisdiction would be redrawn, and the Balkans would be transferred to Constantinople permanently. According to Vatican I, the Bishop of Rome has immediate jurisdiction over the whole world, and no one can remove jurisdiction away from Rome. So how did that happen in the 6th century, and no one saw a problem with it if they recognized Roman immediate authority?
So is he basically arguing that Rome wanted something to be done through jurisdiction, but then they disregarded it? Is that basically his argument?
He's basically saying that because of the fact that there wasn't any form of negation to the fact that Justinian redrew the lines of the papal jurisdiction with the Justiniana Prima as the autocephalous, redrawing the lines that was originally established by Rome. If Vatican I states that there's an immediate authority that exists and that's always been, then why was this?
Yeah, I get what Vatican I says, but how does this contradict the immediate authority of the Pope?
He's saying how can jurisdiction be removed by Rome if they have supreme authority over the entire church? How is it possible for them to lose jurisdiction?
I would need to see the source of them directly losing jurisdiction.
Okay.
I mean,
all right, maybe I'll get something from Pedro on that. We can continue. We have now. We'll do a little bit more. Probably do like 3 or 4 more sets, and then we'll be done. Honorius, you have Papist Talon, and you have ERM left. That's still requesting actively, unless you want me to try to find something in chat.
I'll invite Papist Talon, I guess.
oh boy.
Yeah,
Yes.
Hello.
yeah, wanted to re-ask my question. It wasn't by Leo. It was the council itself writing to Leo. The council writes to Leo. I can give you the source. I can send it in chat after like 50 seconds. It's the council writing to Leo itself, saying that your privileges are from Christ. The excommunication of Dioscorus, that was done by Christ. You are granted this privilege by Christ. So, and also in Canon 28, the same fathers that wrote to Leo also stated that Rome's privileges are from the church. Now, you have the council, so I have to reiterate my question because you didn't answer it properly the first time. So you have the council stating that the council itself stating that the privileges are from Christ and that the excommunication done by Dioscorus was something that was granted to Peter. And you also have in Canon 28 is that the privileges that Rome has was granted by the church. So was the council contradicting itself?
Where in the letter does it say this? I can't see it in the letter. What section? Is it right if you're getting up? So I can read the section he's referring to.
Yeah, I'll bring him back up real quick, and you guys can lay it out real quick so that Jay can answer the question properly. If you want to come back up, Talon, just to kind of like lay out where that source is at so that he can see it.
Hello? Yeah, hold on. Give me a second. Let me get the letter.
It's on letter 98, and it says nothing of what you're saying.
So it says right here, it says that, let me, you know what? Let me just, is it all right if I send it in side chat?
What does it say? I can just, what does it say? I can control.
I have it. I have it here, right? So
yeah, what does it say?
It says, besides all this, he, Dioscorus of Alexandria, stretched forth his fury against him who had been charged with the custody of the vine by the Savior. We mean our course, your holiness, and propose excommunication against one who had hardly unifying the church. So this is the council literally saying that the prerogatives of the Pope was by the Savior. So excommunications done is granted by the Christ. So, and you also have in Canon 28, it says that the privileges that the Pope has is granted by the church. So is the council contradicting itself? That's my question. You can drop me.
Okay, let me start off with and besides all this, he stretched forth his fury even against who can even tell with of course, your holiness and for us against one who had and instead of showing your so rejecting your holiness. So there's just okay, so if you're saying that Leo got the privilege by Christ to excommunicate people, then I don't know what you're trying to prove, because every patriarchate, according to Saint Galatius himself in letter 13, has the right to excommunicate whoever they will. So I honestly don't know what point you're trying to make. Like what? I don't understand.
Okay. Let me see here.
Let
me.
I see. Wait. Oh yeah, I brought somebody up. Is Jason?
But how many more are we gonna do? Because I'm actually getting pretty tired.
I know there's one guy who wants me to bring up, but I guess he'll be the last person I bring up.
Yeah, we'll just well then in that case, since I don't have any Orthodox ones right now, what is your bench, Honorius?
Well, he is Orthodox.
If mine is higher, you concede the debate.
I'm gonna be honest, man. I think I'm gonna avoid that question because it's off topic. All right, Gabriel. That's who I want to bring up now. Last person, I guess.
How are you guys doing today? It was a pleasure watching both of you guys debate. Very good faith. until the end, Jay, but for the most part, it was great. Jay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you have been known to say a lot of controversial things about other denominations in the past, and being very critical on them, right? And not surprising from your background as an Orthodox Christian. But my question to you is, Jay, hypothetically, if Orthodoxy wasn't the truth, out of all the other denominations, even though Orthodoxy is not a denomination, which sect of Christianity would you pick and why? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest.
I mean, he's basically just saying, like, if Orthodoxy was not true, would you still remain Christian and choose a different understanding of Christianity?
Oh yeah, I would still remain Christian.
Yes, and so he's asking you
100%
what you would then move towards.
Yeah, Protestantism, because there's no way Catholicism could still be true if Orthodoxy was false. Because if Orthodoxy is false, Roman Catholicism is still false. If Orthodoxy is true, then Roman Catholicism is still false. So I would still remain a Christian, and I'll probably become Protestant because the evidence of the resurrection is undeniable. So Eastern Orthodoxy being false doesn't mean Christ didn't rise from the dead.
Alrighty.
So yeah.
So, with that being said, I think that we have been able to come to a conclusion about this debate. I'm not really going to do like any like specific poll on like who won the debate or whatnot, because I mean this is a primarily Orthodox server, so that's not going to work. But I do appreciate both of you guys coming up here and making this a pretty good spectacle. For anybody who's in the chat, this is going to be pretty much uploaded almost immediately after I disconnect this stage. I'm just going to make a quick little thumbnail, and then it'll be done. So, anyway, does anybody else have anything to say real quick before I get out of here?
No, I just want to say to Cartesian, thank you very much for agreeing to the debate. And even though it got heated during the debate, it was still a good debate. So I want to say God bless you, Cartesian.
God bless you too, man.
Alrighty. You guys have a great rest of your day. I hope you guys were edified by this conversation, and it helped you spiritually. And I hope it did not darken anybody's noose. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen, brother.
If anybody wants to fight, take the general, and I'll just ban you.
Yeah.
God bless you, Schoolboy. God bless you, Bryce J. And God bless you, Cartesian. Thank you very much for the debate.
God bless.
God bless.